This might be Apple's most anticipated product, and it's coming soon.
Hello and welcome to the All Future Podcast, where we talk all things tech, AI, humanoid robots, sometimes ads. And today we are talking about Apple and their upcoming products. If you're enjoying these videos, we really appreciate you watching. Thank you so much, and consider subscribing if you have not. So first up, we have basically what would be the next big thing for Apple, I would argue. And that is taking all of their current products and putting them into one package that actually makes a lot more sense than the Apple Vision. Because the Apple Vision, fantastic product, not selling well because it just doesn't really have the, I think, form factor that people want, and especially not the price point that people want. But Tim Cook recently did an interview, and he talked about their next product or what's coming in the future, and they're really heading towards an Apple Glasses product, which I think the best example of this we've seen so far is the Meta Orion glasses that they showed off as a prototype, because they do a lot of these functions, but they're actually in like a glasses package as opposed to giant headset.
Right. And everyone knows that's where it's going, right? That's what they want to make. I like, Tim, this is interview with Wired he's doing, and he's like, hey, we made a thing with a bunch of tech in it. We'll see what happens here. I think his actual quote is, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
So, the Apple glasses are, I think, a product that it seems like that's going to get made at some point. But listen to this and how Tim talks about it. He's like, hey, we already made this thing with all this tech in it that's like a super cool thing. And I think what's unsaid here, kind of in parentheses, is, and no one's buying it. So, I do think there's still a question of people. Do people want computers on their faces? And despite all this tech being here, and I think you read kind of the vibe of this interview, and Tim's like, "Oh, we made this thing. We're proud of it. It's got all this stuff in it. We'll see what happens." But then at the same time, you got to be looking at the space in general, and these things aren't. No one's selling a lot of these things, right? No matter what it is. No matter what it is. So if you're talking about what's currently available, say the Meta Ray-Bans, which are cool, they're neat, but they're not selling a lot of them, and they're not mind-blowing either. On the other and complete opposite end, you have the Vision Pro, which is very cool, but very expensive. Aren't selling a lot of those. Other weird devices, Meta Quest, right, which sells okay, and it's got a good price point, but still is fairly low market penetration for a consumer product, right? More people own a bunch of things that are seem more obscure than VR headsets. It's like VR headsets and AR headsets in general have this weird thing in that their consumer awareness of them seems fairly high, but actual consumer adoption of them seems pretty low. So I think that's probably what's underlying all of Tim's kind of thoughts on it and where they're going to steer resources in the future. And it's like, is it even worth us killing ourselves and taking bad press and spending, $500 million in R&D to make a thing that's just never going to catch on?
Yeah. For the longest time, I always talked about VR stuff and said once it gets to the point where it's high enough quality to where I don't notice that I'm taking a sacrifice in that regard, I guess, then it's going to really, change things. And I think we're kind of there, but the price point is still the main thing, because still, like, the Meta Quest doesn't do anything better than the thing it's replacing, if that makes sense. Like, you're not going to watch a movie and enjoy it better in a Meta Quest. You're not going to play a game and have it be better quality than it would be if you use a PS5 or something. But it has its own charm and its own things. The fact that it's immersive and the fact that you have motion controls and all this stuff and can look around. So that's a different experience. But if you're just looking for a high quality gaming experience, you can get that elsewhere. And so the Vision does deliver that high quality screen where you can enjoy a movie in a way that is kind of better and bigger and stuff than a TV is, but it's still this big headset on your face, and it starts at $3,500, like I've been saying. So I think the technology is progressing and getting better and better, but it's still if the accessible version of it, it's not like it's actually better than everything else at what it's doing. It's still like you're taking a quality hit. Um, so I'm excited to see where this goes because the quality getting better and better, the price coming down, and then the form factor getting smaller will make a lot of sense. And as he said, AR is a huge deal. So he also said, we've progressed to what is clearly the most advanced technology we've ever done, which I'd probably agree with. It's incredibly impressive when you put it on, but it just has to make sense. It has to actually be a better version of other things. And still, as someone who owns the Apple Vision, sometimes I'm like, I just want to sit on my couch and have the screen there. I don't want to have to be wearing this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let's look at the other part of this is that if you're what should you be spending money right now on if you're $1 trillion tech company? And maybe it's not these wearables, maybe it is the AI side. And there's,
Mm-hmm.
of course, several rumors about Apple possibly investing in OpenAI and all this kind of stuff. In this interview, they straight up ask Tim Cook this, and it's bad interviewer because he's asking multiple questions in a single block, so it kind of makes some little ambiguity of what Tim's actually answering. So the guy actually asked him, "Hey, we heard that Phil Schiller was going to actually be put on the board of OpenAI if Apple did this big investment as an observer." And Tim Cook's like, "No, there's no truth to that. That's not a thing." And it's just like, well, and I say, wait, well, what was he answering there? And then there's kind of the follow-up question, like, oh, well, did you ever think about investing in OpenAI? And Tim's like, well, I'm not going to say we never looked at it, but it didn't get that far or whatever. So he kind of hedged his bets a
Mm-hmm.
little. So it seems like that's something that Apple considered at one point, but then kind of it didn't progress nearly to the point where they're talking about putting someone on the board, which I never really put a lot of stock in that rumor anyway. I don't think we ever even talked about that rumor on the podcast here because it was
Yeah.
like, oh, that seems a little far-fetched. Um, but it seems that Apple uh, they pulled the plug somewhere early on in the process before they decided to really look at investing in OpenAI, and probably rightfully so. Because why risk the money when there's so many other investors lined up for it, right? So it's not like
Mm-hmm.
that tech is going to exist either way. Like it's not like Apple was the only reason that tech was going to be brought to market. And Apple can then use that money to invest in some of their own stuff and not get in a situation where they're competing with themselves directly, especially if Apple starts developing their own LLMs to use internally.
Yeah, I imagine they're seeing their own internal development and then also thinking, hey, we don't need to invest in them. They're going to need us anyway. That's probably their attitude because OpenAI is going to need to be on these devices, and Apple, owns all these devices and has this whole ecosystem of people trapped inside of it that are excited about Apple Intelligence, even though it's kind of under delivering at this point. So it's like, yeah, we're going to need or ChatGPT, OpenAI as it progresses, they're going to need us regardless of if we invest in them anyway. I think that's kind of probably their attitude.
Yeah, probably so, right? Um, but it does kind of it brings in a little bit. Let me hit the segue to the next topic here, right? Because it brings up the thought of, well, if Apple's going to start investing internally in their own thing, or depending on how they, I mean, not that they obviously already are with Apple Intelligence, but the kind of adjacent to this interview thing as well is that there's no plans to charge for Apple Intelligence ever, at least in the current iteration of it. That's why I feel like they're going to get us on semantics on this. They're like, oh, Apple Intelligence will always be free. Apple Intelligence Max, that'll be $5.99 a month. It's like
Exactly.
yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm like willing to sign up to Apple Intelligence will always be free. But I do think there's not a lot of excitement, I think, to pay for an LLM among a lot of people. And
Hmm.
that's because I think people haven't really seen what these things can do for them yet. And definitely, I don't think people have seen that there's worth a $20 a month price tag that they're willing to pay for this.
Yeah.
I'm using GPT all the time for numerous different things, just organizing things, just helping me collate data and all this kind of stuff. And so for me, I like that $20 a month is a no brainer for me. I use it enough that that's cool with me, right? But I would probably not normal in that case. Like I imagine even people that use GPT a lot probably use it so they can stay on the free tier and be fine with it, right? So like,
Hmm.
oh, like why would I ever pay for it? Like what is this crazy?
Yeah.
And so I don't. I guess it doesn't surprise me that Apple wouldn't have any plans to charge for Apple Intelligence, but I think that like with that little asterisk that if they really amp it up and really make it so work and start executing things, um, more that AI agent kind of system and not just like a cool answer box machine, which is what kind of is now. I could see them
Hmm.
maybe calling it something else and charging. Yeah.
Yeah, the analogy he makes already doesn't really make sense to me because he said, "We never talked about charging for it. We view it sort of like multi-touch, which enabled the smartphone revolution and the modern tablet. But multi-touch was like an R&D situation, and then it's done. Like now they just scale that and continue making phones forever with multi-touch versus AI is just like endless R&D and operational cost. And so, I mean, I could maybe they're thinking like that, but it's a lot more costly.
Yeah, I mean, when I use multi-touch to expand the size of a photo on my phone, it doesn't burn 70 gallons of water in some server in the desert. Like it's
Exactly.
there's zero cost of this at all. In fact, I incur the cost because I'm paying that electricity, right, for
Hmm.
it to have a little more light or whatever. It's using the battery that I have to recharge, right? So
Yeah.
that cost isn't on me at all, but it's on for Apple Intelligence for AI stuff, the cost on the other side is immense. I'll tell you, it was kind of brought home to me today a little bit earlier this week. I was using there's a fairly popular photo editing tool, made by a company called Topaz. And it's AI upscaling of photos or AI cleanup. They do video stuff too. It's just general kind of AI photo tool set.
Hmm.
And will run it all locally. It downloads all of the models, like all the AI models, so that you can run it fully locally on a machine. Okay. And so I'm like, oh, sweet, this is so cool. And I load up my like old picture and like tell it to like clean it up or whatever on my little MacBook, my MacBook Air, right? And it's like, all right, sweet, here's the progress bar. And it's like 17 hours to finish rendering this thing. And here's where they get you. They're like, or you can buy some cloud time and we can do it on our servers and it'll be done in 45 seconds. So it's like
Yeah.
you start to like really understand that that server stuff for AI it's integral to the whole system now. None of this works without supercomputers somewhere else that are drawing an immense amount of power and immense amount of runtime cost. Um,
Hmm.
and so like even like I don't there's not in the foreseeable future anyway where we can run super advanced models fully locally, right? Like that's just not happening. And not even super advanced models, just decent ones,
Hmm.
like you're gonna need to go out to the cloud for them those kind of intensive tasks, right? Um, maybe
Yeah.
not the whatever organizing your tax return, but when you tell it to do something more advanced, it's got to bounce it out. There's going to be costs with that. Apple's got to pay for that somehow. So maybe in Tim Cook's mind, he's like, "Oh, we're going to start charging $20 more for the iPhone in 3 years, and that'll offset the whole cost." So like, yeah, like maybe we won't pay for it by the month, but we're going to pay. Apple's not going to lose money on this thing.
Yeah, I mean, in a certain sense, it could be that they do have to just keep rolling with whatever this cost is, even if it increases for a little bit, because they need to keep selling phones into the future. They need to get us to give us a reason why we need the latest Apple Intelligence iPhone, and that is a part of business, and maybe that's part of their thought here. But I think this is almost a little telling of where they're. I feel like they still aren't completely aware of what's going on in the AI world. Like if like comparing it to multi-touch is so simple, and maybe that's like more looking at the AI features they can deliver locally to an iPhone in the near future. But they're going to be competing with these huge ones that run off of servers to make something like that giant task become 45 seconds. And yeah, in order to compete, it's going to cost them a lot of money. So I think they're going to be exactly what you said. I think we're going to have Apple Intelligence features like cleanup of photos and the little things we have today for free forever. And then we're going to have Apple Intelligence Plus coming in a couple years. Just rolled into the iCloud subscriptions. You don't really feel it, but we're gonna have to pay for these things.
Yeah. Apple's not a loss leader company, right? Like if they're making something, they're getting money out of it somehow. Even the things they give out for free, right? Like they're like, we'll give you all the software and stuff for free, but we include that in we sell X amount more hardware because of that, blah blah blah, and they figure all out the math. So, and then. Yeah, so we'll see what happens to that. Maybe some good news, maybe some bad news. I don't know. But I'll tell you something that's definitely bad news is that we're waiting even longer for our HomePod with a screen, buddy. Like I guess we're pushed back into 2025 at this point. I feel the last time we talked about it was spring was the rumor, and now it's Q3. I want to say is what they're showing Q3 now. So. Yeah, bummer. But it doesn't surprise me. That always seemed like it was coming up too soon anyway. All those rumors that said March, I was like, I don't know about that. Like they need to figure it out. And the only reason when we talked about it before, I was kind of on board for that March timeline was because there's no good HomePod to buy right now because none of them support Apple Intelligence, and it'd be crazy to buy a HomePod right now, right? So Apple needs a replacement in the smart home space. And it needs to be Apple Intelligence capable, and that's going to be this thing, presumably, and it just looks like there's going to be a delay on it.
Yeah, so for clarification, if you don't know, there are apparently two products here. There's a HomePod with a screen is coming soon, and then that robotic HomePod with a screen thing that can move around is a different product for the future. And so this one is just basically what we're seeing from, I think all the competitors have one at this point. I think Amazon just released an even bigger one that is like an Echo tablet type of thing, but that is dedicated for the home. And so, yeah, Apple needs to get into this space, and I think they can do it well. I like all the HomeKit stuff, and it's integrated well, but they need this dedicated device. We're currently delayed on it, but it makes a lot of sense. They want to get it right. They need it to be a great speaker. They need a reason for people to actually buy this. And it's already a niche product, so they need to get it right up front or get us to, convince a lot more people to adopt HomeKit into their homes.
Yeah, we're doing our part, man. I'm preaching HomeKit all the time, but now I'm not going to. I'm like, and then especially we were talking about it in another video, but Google Gemini integration with Spotify, I'm like, man, that's what I need that in a HomePod, right? Like that'd be killer. It seems like these other products are going to start to kind of leave Apple behind a little bit. Not that they already have it in some ways, especially in the smart home space. And so Apple, I feel like they need to get something out there if they want to still be in the space at all. If they want to still compete in the space, I feel like sooner rather than later, they got to have something we can buy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really hopeful that this is going to have good Apple Intelligence. It's going to have an A18 processor, a 6 to 7 inch display, and then of course it's going to have support for home or Apple Intelligence is the rumor, but now we're pushed back. Who knows? But I think every device going forward, they're going to have it. And hopefully, or I guess actually part of this delay could be that they're waiting for the updated Siri to be fully capable before this gets released, because I can't imagine that they could release a new home thing that's more expensive and trying to get more people into it if it has the same one that it has right now, because I use it all the time and sometimes it gets commands great, sometimes it messes up the simplest things that is just basically unacceptable when you're used to other AI voice assistants at this point.
Absolutely, yeah.
But arguably the more exciting rumor here, and it's more exciting to me because of how mad it's going to make Matt, is that they're going to make foldable phones come 2026. That is our current timeline. I think we could just make this rumor every year and push it back another year into eternity. Yeah. But there's supposedly that's still on the rumor cycle for an Apple product in the future.
Great. Sure, man. This thing is crazy. This is crazy. I just don't, there's just no, again, this is another one of those things that outside of kind of the tech literate blogosphere kind of space, whatever you want to talk about, that people just don't seem to have a whole lot of excitement for them, like the phones already that the Samsung makes, Google too, there's other foldable phones out there and have been for years at this point, years. And it has hurt Apple zero not having that option, right? So, like, why deal with the massive headache that comes with these things? Almost all of them have had some kind of notable issue with it, whether it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
the hinge didn't work, or because of how the thing is set up, it was easy to get grains of sand between it, and it would scratch up the lens. And I was just like the mechanical problems associated with having an
Yeah.
actual hinge in a smart device and having the screen still look good when you're having to use, some kind of pliable material as the front of it. It's just rough. It's just rough. And I know that the newer ones, I don't think these are bad phones. I want to be clear. Like I think it's cool. I think it's cool engineering, some cool stuff. They're neat, and I know some people that love them. So good for those people. But I feel like if you're one of those people, I don't know if you. I don't know what the kind of Venn diagram is of people who want a foldable phone and also want it to be an iPhone. Because I imagine
Yeah.
a lot of the people who want the foldable stuff are the more kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say like tech forward people or something, but the type, the kind of guy who would like, whatever, run some weird root version of Android or something like that. I don't know. Like, right? It's like people who kind of want to be different a lot. It's interesting, the old think different ads from Apple. Like now that's really applied to Android. Like I run into people all the time who like have to explain to me, like feel the need to explain to me why they have a Samsung phone. And it's something along the lines of, oh, I just think it's different. It's cooler than it's got me, and really like, the note behind the note is really like, oh, I didn't want to be like everybody else.
Yeah.
And that, I think that extends to things like foldables and flip phones. And I just don't know if there's that much crossover with the Apple side and why Apple would even want to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But Q3 2026 is the current rumor for a foldable phone, and then Q3 2025 is the product we should be getting or the timeline we should be getting that new HomePod with a screen product. And then in the long future, I think hopefully all of this gets wiped out by AR glasses. I'm going with the title Apple Sapphire.
Can't wait to buy them, man. And I hope they have a cool name, just like you suggest. So